you've got a stellar career as an actor. Why would anyone want to be a director?
Maybe the same answer to acting, really. It's not a very conscious choice a lot of the time. It's just, you spend your teenage years and school years figuring out what it is you're going to do, and if you're on the arts, it's like compulsion, stuff inside your body that sends you in one direction or another, and or body, soul, heart, mind, bloodstream. When I was 18, I didn't go to drama school, I went to art school, and so I was 5 years of all of that and 3 years as a graphic designer, and then eventually when I was 25 I went to drama school. So at some point along the way it was getting the art school bit of me down off of the shelf because it had been trained, and putting it together with whatever I'd learned as an actor, and then the word direct emerges out of that mishmash.
I sort of see directing as fairly nightmarish.
Well, acting's got its nightmarish qualities sometimes, I can assure you. Just standing in the wings thinking, what the hell am I doing here? And knowing you're going to be doing that for 6 months, 8 times a week, can be. Yeah, but it's storytelling, and telling a story. I'm sure novelists find their job nightmarish, sitting alone and staring at a piece of paper. But telling a story is a compulsive thing to want to do. It's not as if you seem to have much choice in it. There's a story that's demanding to be told, and once I'd read the script of this film, I knew that I was stuck to it and had to make it happen.
So someone came to you with this project?
Alison Deegan, whose name is on the credits as one of the screenplay writers, so is mine and Jeremy Brock's, but we were really there as a kind of editing device or structural help to a script that is hers, really, or the idea is hers, the research is hers. The invention of it is hers, because Kate's character, of course, couldn't possibly have existed at that time. You would not... So in a way, the point of the film is there would not have been a woman who was anything other than a decorative object at that time. So that's already fascinating. And the fact that Alison had never written a script before, the fact that when it landed through my letterbox quite a while ago, you're reading something by somebody who's seriously dyslexic, as in not just no punctuation, she only knew to put commas in, and they're there after almost every second word, just as a kind of tick. So pretty hard to read, and 180 pages of it. So a lot of editing you knew was going to be going on, but at the same time, wonderfully fresh story idea and also dialogue.
I'm interested in the cast and how a director-actor chooses, because you've got a really interesting combination. Mathieu Chernatz is sort of like so fantastic in Rust and Bone. Tucci, who looks as if he's game for anything, I must say. And Kate, how did you... Because you must sense other actors really acutely.
I admire them all hugely as actors, and then you have to think, well, why do I admire them all as actors? And they're all truth tellers, and they all value listening as much as performing, and so you know that the silences are going to be worth something, and just you can put the camera on Kate for hours as she's listening to somebody else, and she's playing somebody who's having to figure out who she is, as indeed is Matthias. And you've got two faces that are thinking all the time. And that, to me, is often much more interesting than the person who's speaking. And it so happens that I think that Kate and Matthias had great chemistry together, so You know, there's a sexual charge between them that's really important, and you can't even pin that down. It's like the space between two people. There's just this invisible line that you can twang. That certainly is true in the theatre. You know, Adrian Scarborough and Adrian Schiller, who play the two guys at the beginning of the interview, Stephen Waddington, who plays Dura. These are all terrific actors.
Did you know all along who you wanted?
Well, the script had been with me for a while because I wasn't free to direct a movie for quite a long period of time, and
we noticed.
Yeah, and so in a way, Kate became the person for the part because she became old enough. You know, the pressure on actresses is so much to be young enough that actually it was a sort of a relief to be able to say you're actually too young to play this part. Until she was in her late 30s, because of course it had to be a woman you could believe was a professional and could have had a 6-year-old daughter who died. That's part of the narrative. So it was sort of obvious, really. And also, you know, she's passionate about playing independent women.
How do you deal with actors on set? I think that's an interesting dynamic too.
Well, rehearsal, first of all, you ask for rehearsal to be built into the budget. And so we, in the end, we only had like 10 days, but it's still enough time to be in a room with a text, with actors, and not with somebody with a stopwatch and a clipboard. So it's just you guys talking it through, and people have come and done their homework, and, you know, some of that was necessary for a project like this. But then it's just about saying the words and then talking. So, you know, a friend of mine once said that, you know, a rehearsal room should be a marketplace. And I really believe that, well, this is what I think, what do you think? Oh, that's interesting, well, let's do that then. Well, let's try this. Oh, wait a minute, here's a completely new idea. And when you've got people like Kate and Matthias, if we just take those two, never mind the others who all, and Stanley is also a film director, and a very fine one.
Yeah.
That's difficult not to be aware of when he walks onto the set, and he's looking around with a very different set of eyes to everybody else. Kate probably should direct a film. You know, I've said that to her. She's got such a kind of acute brain. I think there's just hopefully a lot of mutual respect in the air, and but we all work from the same standpoint, which is the story is the important thing.
I read somewhere that you did not initially intend acting in the film. That must have been a bit of a challenge too, you know, directing.
It's a nightmare. You know, I don't know how people do it. Obviously, there's enough examples around, but it's just a nightmare. You know, your entire being is focused on this event called making a film, and then somebody's tying you up into bows and boots and sticking a wig on your head, and you've got to sort of alter your focus. The only thing that made it bearable was the fact that, in a way, Louis XIV is a sort of film director waiting for the movies to be invented. Maybe he wouldn't have built Versailles if he could have made films.
Now, I noticed on the credits that it's Lionsgate and BBC. I mean, these days when you see a film starting, it's usually, you know, 15 different production companies and money from all over the place. And I wondered, because it seemed very spare, the number of contributing companies in this. Is that true? And was it easy to get up?
No, it's a nightmare getting films made now, especially, you know, if there isn't an explosion. Well, we do have an explosion.
Yes, you do.
We actually got an explosion in there. And we almost have a car crash. And we do have a sex scene. So, you know, that we tick a few boxes for the funding of it. No, it's a nightmare. The very difficult. You're walking through a production office that's filled with 100 people working away, and me and the producer know that if there isn't a phone call, by the time we finish that day's work, those people are all going home tomorrow. But you have to start, and then you hope the phone call comes. And so, yes, huge kudos to Lionsgate and the BBC, but also to some independent funding sources that don't particularly wish to be credited.
Oh, really? Now, you sort of like, now that the Harry Potter series, is it over? I don't know. But if it...
Yeah, I think safe to say. He's about 47 now, I think.
Are you going to focus a bit more on directing now? Is that what you'd like to do?
I don't know what's going to happen, to be honest. I think... I'm not sure whether this is a rule of thumb, but I've sort of noticed that American actors who direct don't get asked that question. And if you're outside of the American box, you get asked the question. I'm not sure whether that's really true, but if you think about people like Sean Penn or Ben Affleck or whoever, it seems...
I'd ask Sean Penn too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Because, I think he's a wonderful director.
Yeah, he is. And a wonderful actor.
Yes, but, once again, it's a long time between drinks for him.
Yep, all of that. I suppose we all have somebody like Orson Welles to look back on and think, well, there was an extraordinary self-made entity who fought tooth and nail to get his films made. If the costumes didn't arrive, he dressed people in sheets and said, that's what this scene's going to be about, because we haven't got anything to put them in, and then it becomes an iconic scene. And meanwhile, he's producing and acting and directing. That's not for me, but I think you have to, if you're involved in the arts at all, one of your jobs is to put your finger endlessly up to the wind. And these days, that wind so much involves social media and the way that people in the future are maybe not going to go to the movies in quite the same way. They're all going to sit at home and have home movie theatres, and so I'm battling against that because I love being in a cinema with 300 or 400 or 800 people being told a story. And I still think that storytelling is like blood. It's how we understand who we are. And if we've all got our heads down on iPhones and iPads, we're lost. We've got to sit down in the dark and have once upon a time said to us.
You're nearly making me cry because, I despair of the future because I love that big screen. I love being overwhelmed. Tell me, apart from Wells, who was an extraordinary talent, are there other directors that you admire, whose films you look at with special interest?
A lot of it's round up the usual suspects. You and I could probably sit here and, talk about the same movies and the same directors. I've been very lucky to have worked with some amazing directors and learnt from them, and half of them are nutcases in the best possible way. I've watched Mike Newell shout at a cloud. I've watched Ang Lee sit on his own in the middle of a field eating a pink iced bun at lunchtime, etc., etc. And I did sit. My great hero was Robert Altman, and I had sat opposite him, knowing that I was going to not be in a film that he made because I didn't quite believe in the character enough, but. If I think back to when I sat in the cinema and watched Nashville, and I think this movie's changing my life in some way. And there's even a moment in Little Chaos which is absolutely stolen from Nashville in a way, which is when Kate is listening to Matthias sing a song. And that's when Lily Tomlin is in that club in Nashville. And you think, look at that actress doing absolutely nothing. She's not moving a muscle, and you know she's falling in love. And you think there's the power of cinema, to tell that story about that relationship and that woman and what that relationship is going to be with Keith Carradine singing.
It's really extraordinary, you know, because Altman was my hero too.
Oh, really?
And Nashville, I have said for nearly 30 years, is my favourite film of all time.
Yay!
Because, you know, I felt that. Going into that cinema, I walked out like I'd experienced a revelation.
Well, because it's so political too, that's the other thing. So you've got it all going on.
Yeah.
And it's possible to make a deeply political film that's also deeply personal.
Look, I think this has been a most wonderful interview. Thank you for being so charming and informative and honest.
My pleasure.
I wish you well with this film.
Thank you very much.